The subway car sways through the city's underbelly, a steel beast groaning beneath the weight of too many lives pressed too close. Bodies slump against each other, their exhaustion hanging thick in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of metal and the sour edge of sweat. I'm wedged near the window, the glass cool against my shoulder as the train tilts, my short skirt catching on the rough seat fabric. It rides up just enough to bare the tops of my thighs, and I feel the faint lick of chilled air against my skin, a contrast to the stuffy heat of the car. My scarf, frayed at the ends, a faded red thing I threw on carelessly, slips from my shoulder, brushing the edge of my low-cut blouse. The neckline dips lower than I'd usually dare, the fabric clinging to the curve of my chest, and I tug at it absently, aware of the eyes that might linger in a place like this. The train rumbles on, a low growl vibrating up through my boots, and I brace myself against the pole, its icy surface biting into my palm. Outside, the tunnel walls blur past in streaks of grime and shadow, the city's veins pulsing beneath its skin. I'm half lost in the monotony. Same route, same faces, same dull ache of a day bleeding into night. When a voice cuts through the din. It's low, rough around the edges, carrying a grin I can hear before I see it. "That scarf's seen better days," he says, the words casual but pointed, like he's testing the air between us. My head snaps up, and there he is, across the car, leaning against a railing, his frame relaxed but commanding, as if the crowd parts for him without knowing why. His eyes meet mine, dark and unyielding, pinning me in place with a look that feels less like chance and more like intent. They're deep set, framed by lashes too thick for a man, and there's a glint in them, something restless, alive, daring me to respond. The air shifts, thickening with a weight I haven't felt in years, a pull that tugs at the edges of my ribs. My breath stalls, caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat, and I feel the heat bloom across my chest, creeping up my neck. It's not just his words, it's the way they land, the way his gaze strips through the noise and finds me, like I'm the only one here worth seeing. I tighten my grip on the pole, the cold steel a lifeline as my fingers flex against it, nails digging into my palm. My skirt shifts again as the train sways, and I'm suddenly aware of every inch of myself, the brush of fabric against my hips, the slight stickiness of my skin, where it presses to the window, the way my blouse pulls taut when I straighten. His grin widens, just a fraction, as if he senses the shift in me, and I wonder if he can see it too. The flush I can't hide, the way my body betrays a curiosity I didn't know I still had. "Keeps me warm," I manage, my voice steadier than I feel, though it carries a thread of something I can't name. He doesn't answer right away, just tilts his head, letting the silence stretch. The subway jolts, and a woman beside me mutters under her breath, clutching her bag tighter. But he doesn't break that gaze. It's a tether now, pulling taut across the car, and I feel it in my gut. A restless hum, like the train's own pulse echoing through me. My lips part, dry despite the damp air, and I taste the metallic edge of the moment, sharp and unfamiliar. I've been here before, haven't I? The daily grind, the crowded cars, the fleeting glances that mean nothing. But this is different. This is a spark struck against the dark, and it's already catching. The train slows, brakes screeching as it nears a stop, and the crowd shifts, a tide of bodies pressing closer. He doesn't move, rooted where he stands, and I feel the distance between us shrink even as it stays the same. My scarf slips further, dangling against my collarbone, and his eyes flick to it, then back to me, slower this time, deliberate. My pulse kicks harder, a wild thing trapped beneath my skin, and I press my back to the window, the glass a faint anchor against the heat building inside. "Warm's good," he says finally, his voice dipping lower, curling around the words like they're meant just for me. The doors hiss open and people spill out, but I don't look away. Can't, and neither does he. I'm still holding the pole when the train lurches forward again, the jolt sending a ripple through me, from my boots up to the base of my neck. My thighs tense, the skirt riding higher, and I don't fix it, not yet, because part of me wants him to notice. Part of me wants to see what he'll do with it. The hum in my chest grows, unruly and insistent, and I realize I'm not just riding the subway anymore. I'm riding something else. Something that started the second his voice found me. The city churns outside, indifferent. But in here, it's just us. The sway of the car, and the frayed thread of a scarf that's suddenly more than it seems. The train lurches again, a sharp jolt that rattles the car and sends a ripple through the crowd. His knee grazes mine, the brief press of denim against my bare skin searing through the thin fabric of my skirt. It's deliberate, I'm sure of it now, though he doesn't flinch, doesn't shift away like it was an accident. His leg stays there, a steady point of contact, and my pulse surges. A wild rhythm hammering against my ribs, loud enough I swear he must hear it over the subway's growl. I glance up, and his gaze is waiting. Dark, unapologetic, daring me to hold it. Those eyes don't waver, don't soften. They pull me in like gravity, and the air between us thickens, charged with something I can't name but can't ignore. The space separating us, barely a foot now, crackles, alive with a tension that hums beneath my skin. I catch the faint scent of him, leather maybe, or the bite of city air clinging to his jacket, and it coils around me, tugging at something reckless. My mind spins, unbidden, to the heat of his lips. How they'd feel pressed to mine, firm and unyielding, tasting of salt and risk. The urge surges through me, a sudden fierce current that tightens my chest and leaves my mouth dry. I imagine it, leaning in, closing that gap, letting the subway's sway carry me into him, his hands finding my waist as the world blurs away. My fingers twitch against the pole, itching to reach out, to test the shape of that grin up close. But then it hits me, sharp and cold. I'm married. The thought lands like a stone, sinking through the haze. I picture my husband at home, his quiet hands folding laundry with that steady patience I used to find comforting. His fingers smoothing creases in my blouses, the ones I've started wearing tighter, shorter, like the skirt brushing my thighs now. The ring on my left hand feels heavier, a band of gold pressing into my skin, and I twist it absently, the metal cool against the heat flaring through me. He's waiting there, in our apartment, with its neat corners and familiar silences, while I'm here, caught in this stranger's orbit, teetering on an edge I shouldn't cross. His presence doesn't let me go, though. It pulls me closer, a force I feel in the tilt of my shoulders, the way my body angles toward him without my say-so. That voice from before, low, rough, edged with a grin, wraps around the subway's noise again, cutting through the chatter and clatter. "Crowded today?" he says, the words simple but laced with something heavier, like he's speaking past them, straight to me. My throat tightens, and I nod, a small jerk of my head, because words feel too risky, too revealing. My scarf slips, grazing my collarbone, and his eyes flick to it, then back up, slower, tracing a path that leaves my skin prickling under the blouse. Guilt claws at me, a faint sting blooming beneath my ribs, but it's frail against the tide rushing through me. It's drowned by the thrill of being seen, really seen, not as the woman who rides this line every day, who goes home to a life carved out of habit, but as something else, something alive and unsteady. My chest lifts with a breath I didn't mean to take, the blouse pulling taut, and I feel the fabric shift against my skin, the cool air slipping beneath it. His knee presses again, firmer this time, and my leg tenses, a reflex I can't stop. The contact sends a jolt up my spine, not sharp, but deep, settling low in my belly, a heat that spreads and lingers. I should move. I should step back, let the crowd swallow this moment, let the train carry me away from him. But I don't. My boots stay planted, the soles gripping the sticky floor, and I tilt my head instead, just enough to meet that dare in his eyes. My lips part, a silent question I don't voice, and his grin shifts, not wider, but sharper, like he's reading every flicker crossing my face. The subway hums beneath us, a restless pulse that matches the one thudding in my veins, and I wonder if he feels it too. This thread pulling taut, this thing that's not supposed to be here but is. The train slows, brakes whining as it nears another stop, and the crowd presses tighter, bodies jostling between us. His knee slips away, but the absence doesn't cool me. It leaves a phantom warmth, a mark I can still feel. My hand tightens on the pole, knuckles whitening, and I taste the air. Damp, metallic, tinged with something that's him. Next one's mine, he says, his voice dropping lower, and I don't know if he means the stop or something else. The doors slide open and people spill out, but he doesn't move yet, doesn't break that tether. My skirt brushes my thighs as I shift, and I'm caught, between the ring on my finger and the stranger in front of me, between what I should do and what I want. Later, I'm in our apartment, the city's neon glow seeping through the slats of the blinds, casting jagged stripes across the hardwood floor. The hum of the subway is gone, replaced by a silence so thick it presses against me, heavy and unyielding, like a hand I can't shake off. I stand by the kitchen counter, still in my boots, the soles gritty with subway dust, my short skirt creased from the ride. My scarf, frayed and useless now, hangs limp over the back of a chair, and I peel off my blouse, the fabric damp where it clung to my skin. The air here is cooler, sterile, a stark shift from the train's stifling heat, but it doesn't settle me. My husband moves through his routine, a quiet rhythm I know by heart. Keys clatter onto the counter, a faint jingle swallowed by the room, followed by the soft creak of the couch as he sinks into it with a sigh. He doesn't look up, doesn't ask about my day, and I don't offer. It's just us, this space, this life we've carved out, and tonight it feels too small. I pad barefoot to the bedroom, the floor cold against my soles, and slip into a loose shirt, the cotton brushing my thighs, where the skirt left faint red lines. The bed waits, sheets crisp and tucked, a testament to his order, his steadiness. I slide in beside him later, the mattress dipping under my weight, and his breathing fills the dark, slow, even, a tether I've clung to for years through late nights and early mornings. It's familiar, a sound that used to lull me into calm, into safety, but tonight, it's different. It lands on me like a weight, pressing down until my chest tightens, each exhale of his a reminder of where I am, and where I'm not. The city pulses outside, a distant thrum bleeding through the walls, and I lie awake, eyes tracing the ceiling's shadows, unable to close the gap between me and sleep. The stranger's face cuts through the haze, sharp and uninvited, as real as if he's here beside me. Those dark eyes, that grin, crooked, knowing, linger in my mind, etched deeper with every breath I take. I see him in the subway car, leaning against the railing, his knee brushing mine, and the memory ignites something restless, a current that won't let go. My lips part, dry and wanting, and I wonder how it'd feel to trace them across his, to press them to the edge of that grin, to taste the roughness of his jaw, the salt of his skin. Would it be quick, a stolen graze, or slow, deliberate, the kind of touch that unravels you? My tongue brushes the inside of my mouth, testing the thought, and a faint heat blooms low in my belly, spreading upward until it curls around my ribs. My fingers curl into the sheets, the fabric bunching under my grip, and I feel the tension in my knuckles, the way my nails bite into my palms. I should stop this, push him out, let the silence take over. But I don't. I can't. His voice echoes, that low, rough edge wrapping around me like it did in the car, and I imagine it closer, murmured against my ear, stirring the hair at my neck. My husband shifts beside me, his arm brushing mine, warm and solid, and I freeze, guilt prickling beneath my skin like static. He's here, real, the man I promised myself to, while the stranger's just a phantom, a flicker from a train I'll ride again tomorrow. But that flicker won't fade. It digs in, rooting deeper, and my body betrays me, restless under the sheets, alive in a way it hasn't been in too long. The neon light flickers through the blinds, a pulse that matches the one thudding in my veins, and I turn my head, staring at the empty space beside me, where my husband's face lies in shadow. He's asleep now, oblivious, his breath a steady rise and fall, and I wonder if he'd feel it, if he'd sense the shift in me, the way I'm slipping from this bed, this room, even as I lie still. My legs shift, the cotton shirt riding up, and the cool air grazes my skin, a faint echo of the subway's chill. I press my thighs together, trying to quiet the hum building there, but it only sharpens the stranger's image. His hands, broad and sure, the way they'd feel if they slid up my arms, pulling me into that imagined kiss. I roll onto my side, facing the window, and the city stares back, its lights a restless dance that won't let me settle. My husband's warmth radiates behind me, a wall I've leaned on for years, but tonight it's not enough. My fingers loosen on the sheets, trailing across my stomach, and I catch my breath, the touch too close to what I'm picturing. His hands, not mine, mapping the lines of me. The guilt surges again, sharper now, but it's tangled with want, a knot I can't untie. I'm caught in the pull of a man who isn't here, a man whose name I don't even know. And the weight of that, of him, keeps me awake, tethered to the dark, as the night stretches on. Days pass, and the subway becomes my ritual, a thread I weave myself into with purpose. I ride the same line at the same time, no longer a passenger by chance, but by design, my boots clicking against the platform tiles at precisely 6:47 p.m. My skirts are shorter now, the hems skimming higher up my thighs, the fabric swaying with each step I take toward the train. My tops are tighter, clinging to my skin, the necklines plunging just enough to catch the eye. His eye, if he's there. I choose them carefully each morning, standing before the mirror in our apartment, the city's gray dawn filtering through the blinds. The scarf stays, frayed and reckless, a talisman draped over my shoulders, its ends brushing the curve of my chest as I move. I hope to see him, hope so hard it knots my stomach, a taut coil that tightens with every ride. The subway car is a beast of its own, growling through the tunnels, packed with the same tired faces I've ignored for years. But now I scan them, my gaze darting past slumped shoulders and lowered heads, searching for that lean frame, that grin. My fingers grip my bag, nails pressing into the leather, and I feel the dampness of my palms, the way my pulse ticks faster beneath my skin. I've stopped asking myself why I'm doing this, why I'm chasing a shadow from a single ride. The answer's in the hum of the train, the way it jolts through me, mirroring the restless thing he woke up that day. My husband's at home, folding laundry or scrolling through his phone, and I'm here, dressed like this, waiting for a stranger who might not even show. The doors hiss open at my usual stop, a rush of stale air flooding the car, and I hold my breath, the edge of my skirt fluttering as people shove past. Then I see him, leaning against a pole near the far end, his posture loose but deliberate, like he owns the space he's in. That crooked grin flashes, a signal cutting through the dim light, and my chest lurches, a sudden kick that steals the air from my lungs. The car's crowded, bodies pressed tight, the stink of damp coats and cheap cologne hanging heavy. But it's as if the space bends around him, carving a path my eyes can't help but follow. He's real again, not a phantom from my bed, not a flicker in the dark, but here, watching me with those sharp dark eyes that don't flinch. Also, he doesn't speak, doesn't need to. His gaze holds mine, steady and piercing, carrying something unspoken that thickens the air between us. The doors slide shut with a clang, sealing us in, and the train jerks forward, the jolt rippling up through my boots. It mirrors the one in my chest, a deep, unsteady thud that leaves me swaying on my feet. My throat tightens, a dry knot I can't swallow, and I step closer, slowly, deliberately, the crowd parting just enough to let me through. My skirt brushes my thighs, the fabric shifting with each movement, and I feel it, The way it clings, the way it bears me. A choice I made for this moment. My blouse pulls taut across my shoulders, the scarf slipping to one side, and I don't fix it. I want him to see. His eyes don't waver, tracing me as I near, and that grin holds, sharp-edged and knowing. The subway's hum fills the silence, a low pulse that vibrates through the floor, through me, and I stop a breath away, close enough to catch the faint leather of his jacket, the warmth radiating off him. My fingers flex at my sides, itching to reach out, to test the solidness of him, but I hold back, letting the tension coil tighter. I've dressed for this, waited for this, every ride since that first day a calculated step toward now. The nights spent awake, imagining his lips, his hands, have led me here, and the weight of it settles in my gut, heavy and sure. I have to act. I can't just stand here, caught in his orbit, letting the train carry us nowhere. The car sways, and my balance falters, my shoulder brushing his arm as I steady myself. The contact is brief, electric, a spark that races up my skin and lodges beneath my ribs. He doesn't pull away, doesn't shift, just tilts his head, eyes narrowing slightly, like he's reading the move, waiting for the next. My breath catches, shallow and quick, and I taste the air, metallic, thick, tinged with him. The crowd presses closer, a wall of bodies that forces me nearer, and my leg grazes his, the denim rough against my bare skin. My pulse hammers, loud in my ears, and I lift my chin, meeting that unspoken thing in his gaze head on. I've been passive too long, watching, wanting, wondering. Now I know it's time. The subway jolts again, and I let it push me forward, into whatever this is. The train screeches through a tunnel, a raw, grinding howl that reverberates through the car, the sound clawing at the edges of my nerves. I'm still close to him, the air between us taut and heavy, when the lights flicker once, twice, then gutter out entirely, plunging us into a thick, disorienting dark. The crowd gasps, a collective murmur rippling through, but before I can steady myself, he moves, fast. His hands find my hips, firm and sure, pressing me back until the wall of the car bites into my shoulders. The cold metal shocks my skin through my blouse, but it's nothing compared to the heat of him. His chest brushing mine, his breath a sudden gust against my face. My skirt hikes up as I shift, the fabric catching on the rough surface, and I feel the bare stretch of my thighs exposed, vulnerable in the black. Our lips crash together, a fierce, hungry collision that steals what's left of my air. It's not gentle, not tentative. It's a claim, a surge of want that tastes of salt and metal, sharp and alive on my tongue. My fingers tangle in his hair, thick strands slipping through my grip as I pull him closer, kneading the anchor of him against the train's wild sway. The jolt comes then, a lurch that slams us tighter, his hands tightening on my hips, pinning me in place. My chest heaves against his, the blouse stretching taut, and I feel the scarf slip, dangling uselessly at my side. The dark swallows us, muffles the crowd's noise, and for a moment it's just this: the press of his mouth, the scrape of his jaw, the way my body bends into his like it's forgotten how to resist. The lights flare back on, a harsh burst that stings my eyes, and he pulls back, leaving my lips tingling, raw from the force of it. My breath comes ragged, uneven, and I blink against the glare, the car snapping back into focus. Bodies shifting, faces turned away, oblivious to the storm that just broke between us. His hands linger a beat longer, then slide away, and I feel the absence like a burn. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a crumpled scrap of paper, and presses it into my hand. His fingers brushing mine, warm and deliberate. The note's edges are soft, worn, still carrying the heat of him, and he steps back, that crooked grin flashing once before the crowd fills the gap. The train slows, brakes whining, and I stumble toward the doors, my legs unsteady, the kiss still a live wire under my skin. I unfold the note on the platform, the subway's roar fading as the doors hiss shut behind me. His number stares up at me, scrawled in jagged ink, hasty, bold, a dare etched onto the paper. My breath hitches, rough and shallow, and I press my back to a tiled pillar, the coolness grounding me as the rush of that kiss keeps burning, a flame licking up my chest. My lips feel swollen, tender where they met his, and I taste him still, salt, metal, something darker I can't place. My fingers tremble as they clutch the note, the paper crinkling under my grip, and I feel the weight of it, the choice it carries. The platform buzzes around me, footsteps echoing, voices overlapping, but I'm locked in that moment, the dark, his hands, the way he took what I'd been holding back. My husband's face flickers in my mind, steady and unaware, his quiet hands smoothing sheets or stacking dishes in our kitchen. I see him waiting, the apartment's silence wrapping around him, and guilt twists through me, a dull blade beneath my ribs. He doesn't know, can't know, the way my skin hums now, the way my body still leans toward a man who's gone. My thumb traces the numbers, slow and deliberate, feeling the ink's faint ridges, and temptation coils tight in my gut, a knot that pulls harder with every pass. I've crossed a line, felt it snap when his lips found mine, and there's no undoing it. The note's warmth seeps into my palm, a tether to him, to this, and I wonder how far it'll pull me before I let go. The next train rumbles in, its headlights slicing through the haze, and I shove the note into my pocket, the paper crumpling against my thigh. My skirt's askew, the blouse wrinkled where his hands pressed, and I don't fix them, not yet. The crowd surges forward, but I stay rooted, my boots planted on the grimy tiles, the subway's pulse echoing through me. My chest rises and falls, too fast, and I feel the heat lingering, a map of where he touched. Hips, lips, the space between. I should toss the note, walk away, let the city swallow this whole. But my hand stays in my pocket, fingers brushing the paper, and I know I won't. Not tonight, not after that. Night falls, and I'm on our balcony, the city sprawling below like a web of restless lights, reds and blues weaving through the dark, a pulse that never stills. The air is sharp, a cold edge that bites at my skin, slipping under the loose shirt I've thrown on, its hem grazing my thighs where my skirt once clung. My bare feet press against the concrete, rough and chilled, grounding me as the wind tugs at my hair, loose strands whipping across my face. My phone glows in my hand, a small, insistent light cutting through the dusk, his number typed out on the screen, jagged digits I've memorized from that crumpled note, now tucked deep in my pocket. My thumb hovers over the call button, trembling just enough to blur the edges of my resolve, and I feel the weight of it, the pull of what it means. Inside, the apartment hums with its quiet rhythm, dishes clinking faintly as my husband moves through the kitchen, the soft thud of his steps on the hardwood. He steps out behind me, his presence warm and steady, a contrast to the night's bite. His hand rests on my shoulder, fingers curling gently, grounding me in a way that used to feel like home. "Cold out here," he says, his voice low, familiar, carrying that oblivious trust I've leaned on for years. The words hang between us, simple and unassuming, and I nod, my throat too tight to answer. The contrast twists something inside me, a knot of heat and guilt tangling beneath my ribs. His touch so solid, so safe, while my mind still tangled in the subway's dark, in the stranger's hands pinning me to the wall. I want to hear that voice again, low, rough, edged with that grin I can still taste. I want to feel that jolt, the one that surged through me when our lips met, when the train's sway pressed us closer. It's a craving now, a restless hum that won't fade, buzzing under my skin even here, high above the city's chaos. My chest lifts with a breath, the shirt shifting against me, and I feel the echo of his grip, firm, unyielding, a memory that lingers on my hips like a bruise I don't want to heal. The phone's glow casts shadows across my fingers, and I stare at the screen, the numbers a lifeline to that moment, to him. My husband's hand stays, warm and heavy, and I feel the weight of this life, our life, holding me back, rooting me to the balcony, to the man behind me who doesn't know what I've done. The wind picks up, a gust that rattles the railing, and my hair lashes my cheek, stinging where it catches. My thumb brushes the call button, a feather-light touch, and my pulse kicks harder, a wild rhythm against my throat. I shouldn't. I should delete the number, let the note rot in my pocket, let the subway swallow him whole. But the kiss replays, salt and metal, the scrape of his jaw, the way my fingers knotted in his hair, and it's louder than the city below, louder than my husband's breathing at my back. The air bites deeper, prickling my arms, and I shift, the concrete scraping my soles, my body restless against the stillness he offers. You okay? He asks, his hand squeezing once, and I force a hum, a lie that sticks in my chest. The contrast sharpens, his warmth against the night's edge, his calm against the storm churning inside me, and it twists tighter, a coil ready to snap. I want that jolt more than I want this peace, more than I want the safety of his hand. My thumb presses harder, hovering still, and I feel the phone's edge dig into my palm, a faint ache that mirrors the one growing in my gut. I see his grin in the dark, hear his voice cutting through the subway's growl, and it pulls me, a tether I can't cut. The weight of my life here, years of routines, of quiet nights, of his steady hands, holds me back, pinning me to this balcony like the wall of that train. But it's not enough anymore, not after that. My husband steps closer, his chest brushing my back, and I stiffen, the warmth too much, too close. Coming in soon? He says, and I nod again, my voice lost somewhere I can't find it. He lingers a moment, then retreats, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone with the city and the phone. The lights below pulse, restless and alive, and my thumb moves, slowly, then all at once, pressing down before I can stop it. The call connects, a soft click that echoes in my ears, and my breath stalls, caught in the sudden silence. The line hums, waiting, and I feel it. The jolt I've been chasing, sharp and real, surging through me as the city sprawls on, indifferent to the line I've just crossed. His voice answers on the second ring, low, rough, a sound that unravels me as it crackles through the phone, pulling me back to the subway's dark. I'm on our balcony, the city sprawling below like a web of restless lights, reds and blues pulsing through the night. The air bites at my skin, sharp and cold, slipping under the loose shirt I've thrown on, its hem grazing my thighs, where my skirt left faint marks earlier. My bare feet press against the concrete, rough and chilled, and my phone glows in my hand, his number typed out, jagged digits I've traced 100 times since unfolding that crumpled note. My thumb had hovered over the call button, trembling, until it pressed down, the call connecting before I could stop it. Now his voice is here, real, cutting through the silence of my apartment like a blade. You called, he says, a grin threading through the words, and my breath catches, shallow and quick, a jolt racing up my chest. My skin buzzes, a restless flare that prickles my arms, and I lean against the railing, the metal cold against my hip. Yeah, I manage, my voice thinner than I mean it to be, and the line hums, a taut thread stretching between us across the city. Inside, my husband sleeps, his breathing drifting through the open door. Steady, familiar, a tether I've clung to for years. The contrast twists something inside me, a knot of guilt and want tangling beneath my ribs, his warmth a shadow against the stranger's pull. I clutch the phone tighter, the plastic digging into my palm, and feel the wind tug at my hair, loose strands whipping across my face. He doesn't rush, doesn't fill the silence, just lets it hang, and I'm caught in it. The weight of my life here pressing down, the subway's echo pulling me out. I want that jolt again, the one that surged when his lips crashed into mine, when his hands pinned me in the train's blackout. It's a craving now, a hum under my skin that won't fade, louder than the city's distant thrum. My chest lifts, the shirt shifting against me, and I feel the memory of his grip, firm on my hips, a heat that lingers like a brand. I'm married too, he says, his tone steady, but edged with a hunger that mirrors mine. the words landing heavy in the dark. My pulse kicks, a wild thud against my throat, not from shock, but from the symmetry. Two lives tethered elsewhere, colliding here. The wind gusts, rattling the railing, and I steady myself, my free hand gripping the cold metal. He pauses, then his voice dips lower, a rasp that coils around me. There's a motel, off the next stop. One night, no strings, just us. The offer hangs, a dare wrapped in that roughness, and my world fractures, a crack splitting through the quiet nights, the steady hands asleep inside. The city's lights pulse below, alive and indifferent, and my skin prickles, caught in the current of his words. I've stepped too far to turn back, not after the kiss, the note, this call, and the buzz in my veins knows it. Tomorrow, I say, my voice low, sealing it before the guilt can claw me back. Tomorrow, he echoes, a promise that sinks into me, and the call ends, the silence rushing in sharp and cold. My thumb lingers on the screen, the glow fading, and I press my hand to my chest, feeling the wild rhythm beneath my ribs. The motel, off the next stop, a cheap neon blur I've passed on the line, looms in my mind, a place to let this unravel. My husband's breathing drifts louder now, steady and unaware, and the contrast twists tighter, a coil ready to snap. I step inside, the warmth of the apartment wrapping around me, and slide the phone onto the counter, its edges catching the light. My feet carry me back to bed, the floor creaking faintly, and I slip under the sheets, my body tense beside his. His arm brushes mine, warm and solid, and I lie still, staring at the ceiling's shadows, the city humming beyond the walls. The plan takes shape, a weight I carry willingly. Tomorrow, off the next stop, just us. My fingers curl into the sheets, restless, and I feel the echo of his voice, that rough edge tugging me through the dark. The fracture widens, splintering my life into before and after. And I let it, the stranger's promise a tether I've chosen. My husband shifts, his breath a soft rhythm, and I turn my head, the neon glow seeping through the blinds, painting his face in faint streaks. He doesn't know, can't know, the hum building in me, the line I've crossed with a single word. Tomorrow looms, a shadow off the next stop, and I close my eyes, the buzz in my skin carrying me toward it. We meet at a motel, the one he named. Off the next stop, a low-slung building with a flickering neon sign that buzzes in the dark, casting a sickly glow across the cracked lot. The room is dim, its air thick with the hum of the city's pulse beyond the walls, a restless thrum vibrating through the peeling plaster and moth-eaten curtains. I step inside, my boots scuffing the threadbare carpet, the short skirt I chose today clinging to my thighs, its hem riding up as I move. My blouse hangs loose, unbuttoned low, the fabric grazing my collarbone where the scarf once rested. He follows, the door clicking shut, and the space tightens, the weight of yesterday's call igniting between us. Our bodies tangle fast, urgent and unrestrained, a collision of heat and need that pulls me to the sagging bed. He presses me down, the mattress creaking under our weight, its springs digging into my back through the thin sheet. His hands grip my hips, rough palms sliding beneath my skirt, pushing it higher until the cool air brushes my skin, a sharp contrast to the warmth of his fingers. My legs part, instinctively wrapping around him, the friction of his jeans against my bare thighs, sparking a rush that floods my veins. My blouse slips open further, buttons straining as I arch into him, my chest brushing his, the leather of his jacket cold against my flushed skin. His breath rasps hot against my neck, a jagged rhythm that quickens as his lips graze my jaw, then lower, tracing the hollow of my throat. My fingers knot in his hair, thick and damp with sweat, tugging him closer as I feel the scrape of his stubble, a raw edge that leaves my skin tingling. The room fades, the city's hum swallowed by the thud of my pulse, loud in my ears as his weight shifts, pinning me deeper. My hands slide under his jacket, palms pressing against the taut muscle of his back, feeling it flex as he moves. The bed groans, a staccato beat matching the urgency building between us, and I taste the air, stale, tinged with him, leather and salt mingling on my tongue. My skirt bunches at my waist, the fabric twisting as his hands roam higher, fingers curling into my sides, leaving trails of heat that bloom across my ribs. I pull at his shirt, nails grazing his skin, and he responds, a low sound in his throat that vibrates through me, urging me on. It's a rush. Wild, alive, my skin raw and electric where we collide, every touch a spark that feeds the fire. Afterward, we lie there, breathless, the sheets a tangled heap beneath us, the motel's stale air cooling the sweat beating on my neck and chest. My limbs feel heavy, loose, the burn of him lingering, where his lips pressed, where his hands gripped, where our bodies met in that frantic surge. He props himself on an elbow, hair mussed, that crooked grin softened, but still there, and the silence stretches, thick with what we've done. Just this once, he says, his voice low, steady, a vow we both cling to. I nod, my throat tight, and echo it. Just this once. We'll go back to our families, let this fade, bury it under the lives waiting beyond this room. His hand brushes mine, a fleeting warmth, and I hold the promise, willing it to anchor me as the city's pulse hums on, indifferent. I leave first, slipping into the night, the motel's sign flickering behind me. My skirt hangs askew, the blouse half buttoned, and I feel the rawness still. A map of his touch etched into my skin, a weight I carry under my ribs. The subway ride home blurs. The cars hum a faint echo of yesterday, and I grip the pole, my fingers brushing the pocket where his note sits, crumpled, warm, a relic I can't shed. The city sprawls beyond the windows, lights streaking past, and I walk the last blocks home, the key trembling in my hand as I reach our door. It creaks open and I step inside, the apartment's warmth wrapping around me, a stark shift from the night's edge. My husband looks up from the couch, the TV's glow painting his face in soft blues, his eyes lifting, soft, trusting, a question forming he doesn't voice. Late shift, he says, his tone calm, and I nod, the lie slipping out, my throat dry as I drop my bag. His gaze holds, steady and unaware, and I feel the note, a solid weight against my thigh. The city sprawls beyond the blinds, vast and indifferent, its neon veins pulsing through the glass. And I stand there, split, between what I've done and what I'll keep. I force a smile, stepping closer, and he pats the cushion beside him. I sink in, his arm resting across my shoulders, warm and solid, and I lean into it, the motion rote, a tether pulling me back. The hum in my skin fades, but the note stays, a secret I'll carry until it's nothing, or until it pulls me again.